During the summer of 2003, events in the northeastern United States involving a strange human-like creature sparked brief local media interest before an apparent blackout was enacted. Little to no information was left intact, as most online and written accounts of the creature were mysteriously destroyed, primarily focused in rural New York State and once found in Idaho. Self-proclaimed witnesses told stories of their encounters with the creature of unknown origin. Emotions ranged from extremely dramatic levels of fright and discomfort to an almost childlike sense of playfulness and curiosity. While their published versions are no longer on record, the memories remain powerful. Several of the involved parties began looking for answers that year. In early 2006, the collaboration had accumulated nearly 24 documents dating between the 12th century and the present day, spanning 4 continents. In almost all cases, the stories were identical. As I prepare to take my life, I feel it necessary to assuage any guilt or pain I have introduced. It's not the fault of anyone other than him. For once I awoke and felt his presence, and once I awoke and saw his form. Once again I awoke and heard his voice and looked into his eyes. I cannot sleep without fear of what I might next awake to experience. I cannot ever wake. Goodbye. Found in the same wooden box there were 2 empty envelopes addressed to William and Rose, and 1 loose personal letter with no envelope. It said, "Dearest Lenny, I have prayed for you. He spoke your name." A journal entry that was translated from Spanish in 1880 said, "I have experienced the greatest terror. I have experienced the greatest terror. I have experienced the greatest terror. I see his eyes when I close mine. They are hollow, black. They saw me and pierced me. His wet hand, I will not sleep. His voice," and the rest of the text is unintelligible. A mariner's log in 1691 said, "He came to me in my sleep. From the foot of my bed I felt a sensation. He took everything. We must return to England. We shall not return here again at the request of the Rake." From a witness in 2006. 3 years ago, I had just returned from a trip from Niagara Falls with my family for the 4th of July. We were all very exhausted after a long day of driving, so my husband and I put the kids right to bed and we called it a night. At about 4 a.m., I woke up thinking my husband had gotten up to use the restroom. I used the moment to steal back the sheets, but only to wake him in the process. When he returned to face me, he gasped, and he pulled his feet up from the end of the bed so quickly his knee almost knocked me out of bed. He then grabbed me, but said nothing. After adjusting to the dark, I was able to see what caused the strange reaction. At the foot of the bed, sitting and facing away from us, there was what appeared to be a naked man or a large hairless dog of some sort. Its body position was disturbing and unnatural, as if it had been hit by a car or something. For some reason, I wasn't instantly frightened by it, but more concerned as to its condition. At this point, I was somewhat under the assumption that we were supposed to help him. My husband was peering over his arm and his knee tucked into the fetal position, and occasionally he would glance at me before returning to the creature. In a flurry of motion, the creature scrambled around the side of the bed, and then he crawled quickly into a flailing sort of motion right along the bed until it was less than a foot from my husband's face. The creature was completely silent for about 30 seconds, just looking at my husband. The creature then placed its hand on his knee and ran into the hallway leading to the kids' rooms. I screamed and ran for the light switch, planning to stop him before he hurt my children. When I got to the hallway, the light from the bedroom was enough to see it crouching and hunched over about 20 feet away. He turned around and looked directly at me, covered in blood. I flipped the switch on the wall and saw my daughter, Clara, The creature ran down the stairs while my husband and I rushed to help our daughter. She was very badly injured and spoke only once more in her short life. She said, "He is the Rake." My husband drove his car into a lake that night while rushing our daughter to the hospital. They did not survive. Being a small town, news got around quickly. The police were helpful at first, and the local newspaper took a lot of interest as well. However, the story was never published, and the local television news never followed up either. For several months, my son Justin and I stayed in a hotel near my parents' house. After we decided to return home, I began looking for answers myself. I eventually located a man in the next town over who had a similar story. We got in contact and began talking about our experiences. He knew of 2 other people in New York who had seen the creature we now refer to as the Rake. It took the 4 of us about 2 solid years of hunting on the internet and writing letters to come up with a small collection of what we believed to be the accounts of the Rake. None of them gave any details, history, or follow-up. One journal had an entry involving the creature in its first 3 pages and never mentioned it again. A ship's log explained nothing of the encounter, saying only that they were told to leave by the Rake. That was the last entry in the log. There were, however, many instances where the creature's visit was one of a series of visits with the same person. Multiple people also mentioned being spoken to, my daughter included. This led us to wonder if the Rake had visited any of us before our last encounter. I set up a digital recorder near my bed and left it running all night, every night, for 2 weeks. I would tediously scan through the sounds of me rolling around in my bed each day when I woke up. By the end of the 2nd week, I was quite used to the occasional sound of sleep while blurring through the recording at 8 times the normal speed. This still took almost an hour every day. On the first day of the 3rd week, I thought I heard something different. What I found was a shrill voice. It was the Rake. I can't listen to it long enough to even begin to transcribe it. I haven't let anyone listen to it yet. All I know is that I've heard it before, and I now believe that it spoke when it was sitting in front of my husband. I don't remember hearing anything at the time, but for some reason, the voice on the recorder immediately brings me back to that moment. The thoughts that must have gone through my daughter's head make me very upset. I have not seen the Rake since he ruined my life, but I know he has been in my room while I slept. I know and fear that one night I'll wake up to see him staring at me. This story is based on an old Japanese story. What you are about to read will shock you. I need to confess the strange crime I have committed, and I can't bear to keep my secret any longer. I am really at a loss, for the facts which I am setting forth are all so grotesquely out of the ordinary. I beg you not to stop reading. For years I have hidden myself away from the world. You see, I am hideously ugly, too ugly to describe. Please bear this fact in mind, otherwise I fear that if and when you do grant my ultimate request and do see me, you may be shocked and horrified at the sight of my face after so many months of unsanitary living. However, I implore you to believe me when I state that, despite the extreme ugliness of my face, within my heart, there has always burned a pure and overwhelming passion. I've never known love. I've never felt the affectionate touch of a hand or the warm feeling of a pair of lips brushing against mine. I was a carpenter by trade, and I worked all day in a factory making furniture. My specialty is making chairs. My skilled hands carved the wood, screwed the pieces together, fashioned the backrests and armrests, and did the upholstery, patting the cushions and sewing the covers. As I worked, I felt like an artist creating a great masterpiece. When my chairs were finished, I would always test them out to make sure they were comfortable. It gave me a great thrill to imagine all the different people who would sit on the chair I created. Unlike me, they had wonderful, happy lives. Imagine, madam, the pathetic figure I am, sitting comfortably in a luxurious chair of my own making and pretending that I was holding hands with the girl of my dreams. In order to live up to my reputation, I began to devote myself seriously to my new assignment. Steadily, I became so engrossed in my labors that at times I even skipped food and sleep. One day, I was designing a new type of chair, and as I worked, a weird idea suddenly leaped to my mind. Assuredly, it was the whispering of the devil himself. Although it was a sinister idea, it attracted me with a powerful magnetism which I found impossible to resist. I changed the design and made a hollow space inside. It was a cavity large enough to fit a human body. Of course, I had to take out a lot of the wooden framework and the springs inside. The knees would be just below the seat, the head and the upper body would be inside the backrest. Someone could sit inside the chair, and no one would ever know they were there. I left a small space for supplies like food and drinks, and I even included a toilet. By the time I was finished, the chair had become a miniature home. I stripped off my clothes and climbed into the chair. Can you imagine how strange that felt? It was a tight fit, but I managed to get used to it after a while. I was in complete darkness, but I could hear what was going on around me. I heard my colleagues walking around the factory looking for me. They had no idea that I was right under their noses. After a while, some delivery men loaded me into a truck and transported me to a furniture store. They put me on display in the middle of the shop floor and left me there. I was perfectly concealed and nobody was any the wiser. I was like a crab or a turtle, but instead of a shell, I had my chair. Almost as soon as I arrived, customers started testing out the chair. I can't tell you how many unknown bottoms sat down on me. Some of them had big fat bottoms like a jellyfish, and others had thin bony bottoms like a skeleton. It was an amazing feeling. I could feel the warmth of their flesh through the material. Their shoulders rested against my chest and their arms and hands rested on mine. Not one of them suspected that the soft cushion they were sitting on was actually little old me. Previously, because of my grotesque and disturbing appearance, people had always recoiled at the sight of me, but now my skin was virtually touching theirs through a thin layer of cloth. Hidden inside the chair, I imagined myself hugging them and kissing them and wrapping my arms around them in a passionate embrace. Of course, it was a strange sort of existence. After spending so long inside the chair, sitting in the same position, my muscles started to wither away. I could barely move, and my body was crooked and bent. I was folded up like a contortionist, but I didn't care. All I could think about was the exquisite feeling of having people sit on me. One day, somebody bought my chair. The delivery man picked me up, put me in the back of a van, and brought me to the home of a nice family. They put me in their living room facing the TV. Within days, every member of the family had sat on me at least once. I was in heaven, but there was one member of the family I loved more than all of the others. This person was very special to me, and as time went on, I began to fall in love with them. I couldn't help myself. Whenever they sat down on me, I tried to make my knees as comfortable as possible for them. Whenever they leaned back on me, I would embrace them more warmly and make them nice and snug. When they felt tired, I would move my knees back and forth, gently rocking them to sleep. You may think I was mad, but I was madly in love with this person. I became obsessed with them, and I longed for them to return my feelings. I reached the point where I felt that if only they knew I was there, they would fall in love with me too. The person loved to read, so I came up with a cunning plan. I wrote my own story and submitted it to a website they frequented. But now you've probably guessed who I'm talking about. That's right. It's you. I have been in your home for so long, you've probably forgotten where I came from. Every night, I crawl out of the chair and sneak into your bedroom to watch you sleep. I can't bear to be away from you for a moment. I love you, and I think you could love me too, if you only saw me. Now, after you finish reading this, please turn around and look at me. I'll be waiting. Don't be afraid. Come and sit down on my knees, because I miss your touch.